The former Soviet Union, 1917 to 1989. Presentation outline nations of the Soviet Union. Legitimacy in the Soviet Union. Political institutions. The command economy. Gorbachev's reforms, perestroika, glasnost, and novoyania. The collapse of the Soviet Union. 1. Nations of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a federal state with 15 republics in total. However, in reality it was run by the Communist Party and administered centrally from Moscow. A multi-nation state. Russians were the largest nation within the Soviet Union, though they only made up just over half the population. Russian was also the official language of the Soviet Union. 2. Legitimacy in the Soviet Union. Charismatic legitimacy. Attempt at rational legal legitimacy. Charismatic legitimacy. Stalin created a cult of personality. He had complete control over the media and press and portrayed himself as the wise and caring leader. Soviet citizens were forced to worship Stalin, some did so genuinely, while others did so out of fear. Nonetheless, even after his death, and despite his ruthlessness, he is still rated quite favorably by Russians even today. Ruled from 1927 to 1953. Propaganda posters which fueled the cult of personality. Below, Stalin supporters marching in Moscow's Red Square in 2010. Attempts at rational legal legitimacy. The 1936 Constitution guaranteed freedom of religion, the right to work, rest, and leisure, the right to health, and the right to education. In practice, the right to work, education, and health were realized. All Soviet citizens were guaranteed employment and all were provided free state medical care. Freedom of religion was not fully practiced in the Soviet Union. Churches, mosques, and synagogues remained closed throughout the 1950s and 1960s. Elections in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was officially a one-party communist state. Nevertheless, there were regular elections to the Soviet Assembly from 1936 to 1991. In order to be eligible to run, candidates had to be nominated by the Communist Party. The results of the 1979 legislative elections show that the Communist Party won 549,767 seats, a large majority. It was possible to vote for independent candidates as long as they did not belong to another political party. Were these really competitive elections? Soviet citizens voting in a non-competitive election. 3. Political institutions. The Communist Party. The Soviet Legislative Assembly. The Supreme Soviet. The Politburo, Central Committee. Real power resided with the Communist Party and the Central Committee. The Communist Party. The party controlled all three branches of the government, all interest group activity, and supervised elections. All access to power was through the party. The party used nomenclature to nominate and choose party members for promotion. The Supreme Soviet. The Supreme Soviet was a rubber-stamp legislature with little real power. The decisions were made by the Central Committee. The Politburo, Central Committee. Members of the Politburo salute during a military parade. The Politburo consisted of 15 top party officials who ran the Central Committee. The General Secretary of the Communist Party was the head of the Politburo. All major policy decisions were made by this group. 4. The command economy. The Soviet economy was centrally planned in Moscow. Full employment was assured and the government set production quotas, how much should be produced. The emphasis was on heavy industry such as steel and coal. Below, Soviet steel workers. Consequences of a command economy. Limited choice of consumer goods, Soviet car below, 1975. Above, bread lines were common during the Soviet Union as production was not connected to demand. There were often bare shelves and little selection in Soviet supermarkets. 5. Gorbachev's reforms. Mikhail Gorbachev became the leader of the Soviet Union in 1985. He was a young reformer who wanted to democratize and improve the Soviet Union. Little did he know at the time that his reforms would unravel the Soviet Empire. The three big reforms: glasnost, openness, allowed free speech and open debate in newspapers, discussions and gatherings, allowed publication of facts about Stalinist regime, perestroika, restructuring, allowed limited free enterprise, attempted to reform state enterprises towards greater efficiency, created an elected legislature with real power. Novoyania, new thinking, increased communication with Western powers, increased arms reduction. 6. The collapse of the Soviet Union. Gorbachev's reforms had gone too far too quickly. The Soviet Union was rapidly losing legitimacy. One by one the major republics of the Soviet Union began declaring their independence and separating. Communist hardliners staged a coup to get rid of Gorbachev. Ukrainians demonstrating in the streets demanding independence from the Soviet Union. This was confirmed by referendum in 1991. Backed by the people, former Communist Party member Boris Yeltsin declares a new democratic Russian Republic in 1991.